"Shut the hell up and get out of here." Barron Trump screamed at the airport staff, his face red with anger. The staff member, clearly taken aback, didn't expect the young Trump to lash out like that. But the tension in the air was thick, and the words Barron spat were sharp, filled with frustration. "Who the hell do you think you are, treating me like this?" It all started when Barron, just a kid, was unfairly kicked out of the lounge. The staff member had no clue who he was and assumed he was just some spoiled rich kid. But Barron wasn't about to take their insults lightly. His temper flared as the female staff member hurled nasty words back at him. "You think you're above everyone else?" she shot, mocking him with a sneer. What followed next shocked everyone. As the argument grew more heated, the situation spiraled out of control. Until someone walked in, someone who completely changed the game. The moment Melania Trump stepped into that airport lounge, everything turned upside down. The chaos in the airport lounge was palpable. Barron Trump, usually known for his quiet and composed nature, was now in the middle of a verbal brawl with a staff member. It all started innocently enough, a misunderstanding. But when Barron, who had been calmly sitting, was suddenly asked to leave for reasons that felt completely unjust, something inside him snapped. The female airport staff member had assumed Barron was a regular traveler, maybe even one who felt entitled to special treatment. She didn't know who he was, and frankly, she didn't care. In her eyes, Barron was just another teenager who could be treated like anyone else. But she was wrong. As soon as Barron stood up, the words she threw at him weren't just rude. They were personal, demeaning. The things she said were meant to hurt, and they did. It wasn't just her mocking tone that stung. It was the arrogance with which she belittled him. Barron, already frustrated by the sudden request to leave, snapped back. He wasn't about to let anyone disrespect him, especially not for something as trivial as his name or status. The confrontation escalated quickly as Barron, losing patience, threw insults back, louder and more intense. The staff member didn't back down either. Words were exchanged, insults were hurled, and the situation quickly spiraled out of control. But then, just when it seemed like nothing would make the situation better, when Barron's anger had reached its peak, the door opened, and that's when everything changed. Melania Trump, Barron's mother, walked into the room. The moment the airport staff member had asked Barron to leave, it was clear that things were going to escalate. It wasn't just a simple request. There was something in the tone of the staff that made Barron feel like he was being treated unfairly, something he couldn't quite put his finger on, but he could sense it. And when the staff member had raised her voice at him, Barron knew this wasn't just about rules or procedure. It was personal. "You think you're too good for this place, huh?" The staff member spat at him. Her eyes were cold, dismissive. "You think your last name gets you special privileges?" Newsflash, no one's above the rules. Barron's fists clenched as the words stung. He wasn't used to being treated like this, and this wasn't the first time. He had felt the weight of judgment, simply because of his family name, but this was different. There was no reason for this person to be so rude, so condescending. He was just a kid, and yet she spoke to him like he was a nobody. "Are you seriously going to kick me out because I'm not some regular passenger?" Barron's voice had risen, and he felt the anger building inside him. The staff member, far from backing down, only sneered and took a step closer, her voice now laced with venom. "You'll leave when I say you will," she shot back, crossing her arms and glaring at him. "And you can stop with the attitude. People like you think they can just walk all over us. Not here." Barron stood there, his face flushed with anger, fighting the urge to shout back even louder. He could feel the eyes of other passengers turning toward them, the atmosphere growing thick with tension. Every word the staff member said made the situation worse, and Barron's patience was quickly running out. He could feel the blood rushing to his head, his heart pounding in his chest. "Get out," she snapped again. This time she was practically shoving him out of the seat, pointing toward the exit. Barron's breath hitched as he shot back, his voice trembling with fury. "Who the hell do you think you are?" The words escaped before he could stop them. There was a fire in him now, a fire that had been kindled by the injustice of it all. The argument had drawn attention, with other people looking on, some whispering to each other, others clearly uncomfortable with the escalating confrontation. The air was thick with anticipation as Barron stood his ground, not backing down from the verbal assault. But just as things were about to get even uglier, there was a shift in the room. A sudden presence, calm but powerful, entered the lounge. Melania Trump had arrived. The room fell silent the moment Melania Trump entered. It wasn't just her presence, it was the way the entire atmosphere shifted as soon as she stepped through the door. People who had been watching the exchange between Barron and the staff member now turned their attention to her, and the tension in the room seemed to dissolve with her arrival. Barron, still fuming, hadn't noticed her at first. He was too focused on the unfairness of the situation, too consumed by the anger that had bubbled up inside him. But as soon as he caught a glimpse of her, his heart skipped a beat. He hadn't expected her to be here. The sudden realization that his mother was standing in front of him gave him a moment of pause. Melania wasn't just Barron's mother. She was a figure of poise and dignity. And in that moment, Barron felt a sense of relief. He wasn't alone in this. The staff member, clearly unaware of who had just walked in, continued to glare at Barron, her arms crossed. But when she saw Melania's face, something in her expression faltered. It was a brief moment, just a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. But it was enough to show that she knew this wasn't just any ordinary passenger. Melania's voice broke through the stillness of the room. "Excuse me," she said, her tone calm but firm. "What's going on here?" Her presence was commanding, and no one in the room dared to speak over her. The staff member, flustered, stammered, Well, he's causing a scene, ma'am. We asked him to leave, but he refused." Barron, still furious but now more aware of the growing audience, spoke up. "She's been disrespecting me from the start, telling me I'm some entitled brat, kicking me out just because of my last name." Melania turned her gaze to Barron, her expression softening just slightly, as if silently telling him to calm down. Then she faced the staff member again, her voice unwavering. "You're telling me you asked him to leave because of his attitude?" "Yes, ma'am," the staff member replied, her confidence starting to waver. Melania's eyes narrowed as she processed the situation. She had seen her son's frustration, and she knew that this wasn't just about the argument. It was about how Barron was being treated because of who he was. But she also knew that this wasn't the time for confrontation. Instead of letting her emotions get the best of her, Melania took a step back, her mind calculating her next move carefully. She could have easily lashed out, but she understood the power of handling things with grace. "Let me make something clear," Melania continued, her voice low but sharp. "No one, absolutely no one, deserves to be treated this way. Not my son and not anyone else." The staff member, now visibly uncomfortable, began to stutter, trying to defend herself. "I didn't mean to cause trouble, ma'am. I just—" Melania raised a hand, silencing her. "I understand you were doing your job, but you've crossed a line here, and now you'll apologize to my son." The staff member's face turned red. She glanced around at the watching crowd, realizing she was no longer in control of the situation. The tension was thick, and the weight of Melania's words hung in the air. It was clear she wasn't going to back down. This wasn't a simple apology. It was a lesson in respect and understanding. Barron, still standing there with his arms crossed, watched his mother carefully. He could feel the tension in the room slowly dissipating, and despite himself, he felt a slight sense of pride. His mother wasn't just defending him. She was showing everyone around her what dignity in the face of adversity looked like. The staff member, after what felt like an eternity, muttered a quick, almost reluctant apology. "I'm sorry, sir. I didn't mean to upset you." Melania didn't immediately acknowledge the apology. Instead, she looked at Barron, her gaze softening. She didn't need to say much for him to understand that the lesson wasn't just for the staff, it was for him too. It was a reminder that in moments of injustice, responding with dignity was the best way to reclaim power. Finally, Melania turned back to the staff member, her tone much calmer now. "You will respect my son, and you will treat all passengers with the same courtesy, no matter who they are." Her words were quiet, but they carried weight, leaving no room for argument. The staff member, now visibly shaken, nodded quickly. "Yes, ma'am, I understand." As the apology hung in the air, the room seemed to breathe a collective sigh of relief. For a brief moment, the tension that had thickened the space dissipated, but there was still a heavy silence, a weight that lingered as the consequences of the staff members' actions began to fully settle in. Barron stood there, his arms crossed, still processing everything that had just happened. He looked at his mother, not with the same frustration he had earlier, but with a deeper understanding. His heart still racing from the earlier confrontation, now slowed as he realized what had just unfolded. Melania's eyes locked with his. No words were exchanged between them, but in that brief, silent exchange, Barron understood everything. She wasn't just standing up for him. She was showing him how to rise above the ugliness of judgment, to remain composed and dignified, even in the face of unfairness. It wasn't about winning the argument. It was about holding on to something far more valuable, your integrity. The staff member, still fumbling with her words, shifted uncomfortably. I'm really sorry for the way I treated you. Sir, she mumbled, her voice shaky. I shouldn't have said those things. I was out of line. It won't happen again. Barron didn't respond right away. Instead, he studied her, feeling the weight of her apology, but also knowing that something deeper had been exposed. This wasn't just about an apology. It was about the lessons they had all learned in this brief but intense encounter. He could see that she was genuinely remorseful, but he also saw that she had been forced to face the consequences of her actions in front of everyone. Her position of authority had crumbled, and now she was the one feeling vulnerable. Melania didn't let the moment drag on. She nodded slightly, her face unreadable but calm. Apologies are only meaningful when backed by actions, she said softly, her voice no longer harsh but measured. I hope you learn from this. Not just in how you treat my son, but in how you treat every person you come into contact with. You never know what someone is going through. You never know what's behind their demeanor. The staff member's head hung low, the weight of Melania's words settling on her shoulders. Barron, still processing the emotions swirling inside him, now understood. This moment wasn't just about what had happened to him. It was about something bigger, something more profound. It was about kindness, respect, and how people often make snap judgments based on things they don't understand. The room had quieted, all eyes on Melania, who was now speaking with such calm authority that it was hard to ignore the respect she commanded. There was a moment of collective reflection. The people in the room, who had been merely passive observers moments ago, were now deeply engaged, aware of the deeper lesson unfolding before them. They saw how the power dynamics had shifted, from an entitled passenger being mistreated to a confrontation, being handled with dignity, respect, and wisdom. It was clear to them that Melania wasn't just protecting her son. She was teaching them all a lesson in grace, and in that lesson, she had turned an unpleasant confrontation into an opportunity for growth. Barron, looking at his mother, now felt something he hadn't felt before: pride. But it wasn't just pride for her standing up for him. It was pride for the way she had handled the situation. Barron had always admired his mother for her elegance and poise, but now he saw her in an entirely new light. She wasn't just a figurehead in the media. She was a woman of true strength and wisdom, someone who knew how to stand firm without resorting to anger or petty revenge. She had shown him that there were more powerful ways to handle adversity than through brute force or loud arguments. Just as the atmosphere was about to return to its normal flow, Barron spoke, his voice calm but with a hint of gratitude. Thank you, he said, turning to the staff member. Though his eyes were still guarded, I appreciate the apology, but I think we all learned something here. The staff member, clearly humbled, nodded again, her face flushed. I'll do better, she whispered. Melania glanced at Barron, her eyes softening. Then she looked at the staff member, her expression still composed but with a small smile. That's all we can ask for. For Barron, this wasn't just about a confrontation in an airport lounge. It wasn't just about a staff member apologizing. This was about something far greater, a transformative moment that had changed the way he viewed conflict. Empathy and the power of quiet strength. It was the kind of lesson that could last a lifetime. The kind of lesson that not only shaped who he was becoming as a person, but also showed him the importance of understanding and respect in a world that often lacked both. As Melania turned to leave, Barron followed her. His steps more measured now, his heart lighter. The storm that had raged in him just moments ago had passed, and what was left in its wake was something better: clarity. It wasn't about proving a point or winning the argument. It was about the lesson they had both learned: that kindness, dignity, and respect would always outweigh the noise of judgment. And with that realization, Barron walked out of the airport with his mother, a little wiser, a little stronger, and a lot more aware of the power of grace in a world that often tested it. As Barron and Melania made their way through the bustling airport, the chaos of the confrontation slowly began to fade into the distance. The air felt lighter now, as if the weight of the tension that had gripped the space had been released, replaced by something more profound, peace. Barron, still processing the events that had unfolded, found himself in deep thought. He had witnessed firsthand how a simple misunderstanding could spiral into something ugly, but he had also seen how a single moment of grace could completely change the outcome. He wasn't just thankful for his mother's intervention. He was grateful for the lesson that came with it. It wasn't every day that someone had the opportunity to witness such a raw and real lesson on empathy, respect, and understanding. Looking at Melania, Barron realized that the woman he had always admired for her beauty and composure was so much more than that. She was a woman of substance, of quiet strength, who knew how to handle adversity not with anger or resentment, but with dignity. He had always known her as his mother, but now he saw her as a role model, someone who taught by example, who led not through force, but through wisdom and kindness. As they neared the exit of the airport, Barron's heart felt lighter and his mind clearer. He understood that this wasn't just a lesson for the staff member who had wronged him. It was a lesson for everyone who had witnessed the event. In a world where judgment and quick conclusions often lead to unnecessary conflict, the true power lay in understanding, in pausing before reacting, and in choosing grace over judgment. Melania, sensing Barron's change in demeanor, glanced over at him. "You okay?" she asked, her voice soft, concerned. Barron nodded. "Yeah," he said, offering a small smile. "I'm good. I don't know. It's like I saw everything differently. Like maybe I've been looking at things all wrong." Melania smiled in return, her eyes twinkling with a mix of pride and understanding. "We all have those moments, Barron. It's how we grow. We don't learn from everything being perfect. We learn from the struggles, from the mistakes, from the times when things don't go according to plan." Barron let out a slow breath, his shoulders relaxing as he processed her words. There was a calmness about her that he admired, a stillness that didn't need to shout to be heard. It wasn't just about how people treated him, it was about how he treated them. And that, he realized, was the greatest lesson of all. As they stepped outside into the cool air, Barron looked around at the bustling world around him. Everything seemed different now. The people passing by, lost in their own worlds, seemed to move slower, as if they too had just witnessed something life-changing. But Barron knew better. They were going about their day, not even aware of the pivotal moment he had just experienced. And that was okay. Not every lesson needed to be shared. Sometimes the most profound lessons were the ones that stayed with you, quietly shaping who you were becoming without anyone else knowing. Barron looked over at Melania once more, a deep sense of gratitude filling his chest. He had learned more in the last hour than he had in weeks. And in that moment he understood that this experience, this simple, chaotic moment in the airport, was one of those rare instances in life where everything changed, not because of a big gesture or a dramatic event, but because of a small but powerful act of grace. As they walked towards the car, the events of the day still fresh in their minds, Barron knew one thing for certain. He would never forget this lesson. It wasn't just a moment of conflict. It was a turning point in his life. He had learned the power of restraint, the importance of empathy, and the incredible strength it took to respond with kindness, instead of reacting in anger. And as they drove away from the airport, Barron felt ready to face whatever came next. With a newfound sense of clarity and understanding, life wasn't always going to be easy, and people weren't always going to treat him the way he deserved. But with the lessons he had learned today, Barron knew he could handle whatever challenges lay ahead, gracefully and with dignity. As you reflect on this story, ask yourself, how would you handle situations like this? Would you choose kindness and understanding, or let anger take control? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button to see more stories that inspire growth and change. Thanks for watching, and remember, every moment is an opportunity to choose empathy over judgment. See you in the next video.